Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to run searches in Clay if you run a recruitment agency and you're looking for ways to find leads and companies that are hiring and decision makers at those companies. So when you're in Clay and you create a new workbook, it's going to look like this as of the time of this recording. It's constantly changing, and you'll see on the left we have find people, find companies, find jobs, find local businesses, and import from CSV. Now it would be tempting for you to go straight to find jobs. That sounds logical, doesn't it? But if you look at what's available when you are trying to do a job search, firstly, what you'll see is that on the left, these are the search criteria that you can control. So you can exclude jobs if you're on the Explorer plan or higher. You can search by job titles to include and exclude. Exclude is very useful. You can search by keywords in the job description. So this is extremely useful, and this is a great way to find, for example, companies that use specific software. Maybe, for example, it's QuickBooks or Xero if it's accounting related. Maybe it's SAP, maybe it's anything you can think of, right? It doesn't have to be technologies. It can be any keyword that you want. So some other good ideas are searching for keywords like urgent or immediate hire or ASAP, because those keywords signal that there's urgency behind this hire. So you need to think about outside of the box and think of how to utilize this. It's very, very powerful. Next, you have location. This is the location of the job. So even if the job is based in, say, the United States, the company might have their headquarters in Botswana, for example. So then there's the employment type, so you can choose whatever is applicable to you. The recruiter, does it have a recruiter attached? So take a look at this. You can see there are 12 million jobs here. And by the way, these jobs are LinkedIn job posts only. If I toggle on has a recruiter, we go from 12 million to 774,000. So that means there are roughly 6 or 7% of jobs that have a recruiter attached to the job. Now, in most cases, that recruiter is going to be a talent acquisition professional or a human resources person. But in startups, there's a higher chance that it might be the actual direct hiring manager of the role, such as a founder, a CEO, a head of IT, whatever it may be. So that is useful to use if you want to find opportunities where you're going to be reaching out to a person who is definitely related to that job, sort of a key stakeholder in relation to that job. But if you only rely on this, you're going to miss out on the other 93% of job posts that are out there. Then we have posting date. So usually what I'll do is set it to days since posted. Maximum I'll set usually 90 days, because a lot of companies just like to collect resumes. So they'll leave a job open and hope that they just keep on collecting resumes over months and months and years. And what that means for you is that they're never actually going to be serious about hiring. They just want to collect resumes so that when the time's right, they can reach out to those candidates. Then companies. So this is a new improvement. You can add a list of company identifiers, and it says here company LinkedIn URLs, domains, sales navigator URLs, or sales navigator company IDs. Now, if you use a sales navigator URL, I believe what that will do is it will charge you 1 credit per row. So I'm not too sure about that. This is a brand new feature that's just been added to the job search, but it is very nice to see that finally they've made it so that you can actually search for jobs using a list of companies. So what you can do is, if you have a list of companies that you want to target that are in a specific niche or of a certain headcount size, or if they're in a certain state, then you can put in that list of companies and you can simply paste in their domains, for example, like Amazon.com, Microsoft.com. So this is very, very welcome. This was never here until about the last week. You can also start from a clay table of companies, which is what I wanted to get to later in this video. So if you start from a clay table, it's going to show you which company table do you want to select. And you would click on this and then select from the pop-up which companies table you want to use. When you're doing that, we'll get into that in a minute, you want to keep everything very organized in your workspace. And then you can also select a filtered view of that table. So we'll get to that in a minute as well. And then you can limit the results. So you can limit the number of job posts per company. Until recently, I'm not sure if this currently works or not. This hasn't worked too well. So in other words, it just doesn't work. But they're always fixing things, and hopefully it will start working, or even better, it does work. Right now, we don't know. You just have to test that. So you can limit the number of total results. In my Explorer plan, I have up to 25,000 results. And then you can also limit the results per company, which, as I just mentioned, doesn't work too well as of my knowledge, as far as I know. AFAIK. Anyway, so what we're going to do now is show you how to get started with a clay table of companies to begin with. The reason why this is so much better than starting from a job search is because you want to target companies of a specific industry, most likely, and you also want to target companies of a certain headcount range, because if not, you're going to be reaching out to companies that are way too big, already have internal recruitment teams, and they're just not going to be interested in working with you. So what you want to do is, let's click out of this, and if we click on Find Companies, then this is going to give us a lot of options. You can see that there are 35 million companies on Clay, in Clay's database, and all of these companies, to my knowledge, are coming from LinkedIn. So there are a lot more companies out there that just haven't registered themselves on LinkedIn, and so you just need to be aware of that, because there may be lots and lots of opportunities out there for you as a recruiter that are just not going to be in Clay, just because certain industries, for example law firms, a lot of them obviously are on LinkedIn, but a lot of them are not. So you need to branch out and look at other data sources to get those companies. So what I tend to do when I'm building is I will select, obviously, the industry that I want to focus on. So let's say, let me show you another example. Let's say, for example, you're interested in manufacturing companies. Let's say that you're interested in automation machinery manufacturing. Now, when you select this is based on a tagging system. So a lot of these companies in here are going to have registered their primary industry or marked themselves in some way as being an automation machinery manufacturing company. But what you need to understand is that a lot of irrelevant companies who provide services for automation machinery manufacturing companies will also mark themselves as being in the same industry in order to increase the chances of making connections on LinkedIn and things like that. So one example is software companies. If there is a software company that focuses on automation machinery manufacturing, you want to make sure that you exclude software development and all of the other things. For example, desktop computing software, embedded software products, and so on and so forth. So what I'll typically do is go to my best friend in the world. That sounds a bit sad, doesn't it? But it is for many of us these days. We use it a lot. So I would just say targeting automation machinery manufacturing companies in Clay. What industries serve them that I need to exclude? And so it's case by case, but we'll come back to this answer in a second. But basically what you want to do is think about, definitely, no matter what, you always want to exclude your competitors. So you definitely want to type staffing and recruitment, staffing and recruiting, outsourcing and offshoring. There are two of those. I would also recommend excluding human resources and human resources services, and then executive search services. So there are 6 of those categories that are competitors that you want to definitely always exclude when you're doing these searches as a recruiter or for a recruitment agency. So let's go back to ChatGPT and see what it said. So it's told us we need to exclude distributors, part suppliers, and so on and so forth, marketing agencies. All of these companies provide services for automation, machinery, manufacturing companies, and you want to exclude them all. Company size, you want to choose the size range that you want. Think about companies of 2 to 10 people. Often they don't have much budget for hiring, and also they're going to be very, very picky about who they hire, because just one new person in the company will have a massive impact on the dynamics of the people in that team. So I tend to not target this. I tend to go for like 11 to 50, definitely a sweet spot. Unfortunately, in Clay currently, you can't choose a custom headcount range. I would like to do, for example, 18 to 56 people, but I can't. So I have to choose 11 to 50, maybe 51 to 200. But you need to think about what changes as you increase. And if you include 51 to 200 employee size, should you be reaching out to the CEO and the founder and the managing director? Probably not, depending on what roles you're trying to pick up. The CEO is going to be far removed by that point when the company is that size. So you just probably want to handle that as a separate search. So I would get more granular with it and just do multiple different searches and have different wording in your campaigns. Then associated member count. So this is something new that I haven't seen before. I don't know exactly what this means, to be honest with you. Associated member count. Maybe it means members who are associated with this company on LinkedIn. In other words, how many people have a LinkedIn profile that shows that they are at this company. So this is maybe another way that we can filter out companies that are too big or too small. And the great thing is it lets you put in exact numbers. So if I just remove these numbers to begin with, you can see that there are 17,280 results. If I put a minimum of 11, there are now 6,176 results. So we can dial that down a bit. Now there's 8,000. If we put a max of 50, now there are 7,744. So yeah, I believe that this is people who have a LinkedIn profile that shows that they're working at these companies. I could be wrong about that. And then, so this is a useful thing, company filters. Obviously, you probably don't want to target government agencies. Self-owned, I think, is fine, because a lot of companies start off as a self-owned company, and then if they succeeded and grew, they might end up having more employees, but they might still be classed as a self-owned company. So we'll choose that. Educational, no. Non-profit, no thank you. Self-employed, same thing again. Partnership, public, privately held, sure. Cool. Description keywords to include and exclude. I love this, because here what we have is predefined categories of industries, right? But if you're searching for something very, very specific, like for example, climate artificial intelligence, you're just not going to have a category for that here. So often what I'll do is I'll use keywords to include in order to get very, very specific about very niche types of company I want to find. And then I'll use tons and tons of exclusion keywords to just filter out all the crap. Like in here, even though we've already put, for example, human resources, staffing, recruiting, I have a massive list of keywords in a Google Sheet that I use to exclude staffing, recruiting, recruitment, recruiter, executive search, talent, blah, 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 ATS, whatever. So this is very, very powerful, and I recommend you to use it. So now we're down to 7,367. Minimum follower count. How many followers does this company have on LinkedIn? This is good because it weeds out companies that may have just been a fly-by-night operation who just sort of went out of business. So let's start with a minimum of 10. That's dropped it a bit. Location, obviously very important. but you need to think, as a recruiter, you need to think about, let's say that a company has a job posted in the US, okay, and they might have a presence in the US, but where is their location? They might be headquartered in London, England, right? Or they might be headquartered in Sydney or Chennai or whatever. So by putting a location on the company, it's not always a good thing to do. You would put a location filter on the job post and on the decision makers, but not always necessarily on the location of the company. Although that said, obviously the majority of companies that are posting jobs in the US are going to be US based companies. So if you're on a lower plan like the starter plan of Clay, where I think it lets you do up to 5,000 companies per search in the results, then it can be useful to use this and put in United States. It's up to you. It's case by case, right? Now, that said, if you decide to not put in the United States, what you might want to do is exclude certain places. Now, countries, it only gives you the ability to include certain countries, whereas exclusions only include cities and states. Like, I cannot put, for example, United States, to my knowledge. Okay, it turns out I can. And if we look at the countries, okay, so that's good. So you can actually exclude countries here. They've just worded it strangely. Not sure why. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Next thing is exclude companies. So this is very, very powerful. They've really made some big improvements to this in the last week or so. So what you want to do is build up a list of companies that you definitely want to exclude from all your searches. Those might be other recruitment agencies. Those might be known automation machinery manufacturing companies, if that's your niche, that are too big, or you know for a fact that they definitely do not work with recruiters. Then you can have that exclusion list and you can keep adding to it all the time, and then you can exclude those companies from these results. So that is very powerful. I believe this is only available if you are on the Explorer plan or higher. And then search with AI, this is a new feature again. So list of similar companies, natural language description. So this is another very powerful way to search, and I would recommend that you try both ways. So try without using the search with AI feature, and then try with it by starting with similar companies, aka lookalikes, and also by trying the natural language description. So you can ask ChatGPT about that and ask it to recommend you what you should put in there. Then we have AI filters. This is new as well. So business types, B2B, B2C, nonprofit, very, very useful stuff there. If you were targeting local businesses that do B2C, what you could do is put this filter on there, and then you could actually remove a load of industries. Instead of focusing on one specific industry, you could widen it that way. Revenue streams. Now this, I'm not sure how accurate this is, and I would worry that, okay, so revenue streams, what it is it shows you where they're getting their revenue from. Be cautious when you use this new feature, because I'm not sure how accurate it is at this point. You might miss out on a lot of companies if you were to use this. So just use it with caution and test, and then you can limit results if you need to, but why would you do that? So, okay, we have 7,328 companies here. I'm just going to click continue now that we've walked through all of those search criteria options. And you're presented with this: source creation successful. Do you want to use any of these enrichments? Look at how many credits they cost. No, you do not. Enable automatic updates for this table. It's toggled on. Auto update causes actions to run automatically when rows are added or cells are edited. So I think, in my opinion, I would usually just turn this off, because a list of companies is a fairly static list. It doesn't change that much. There aren't like hundreds of new companies coming into an industry every day. So we're going to toggle that off and click continue for free. And so now what we have is a list of companies in a specific niche, and you can see that they're all over the place. And we get a LinkedIn URL. I like to rename this and call it LinkedIn. I call it company LinkedIn URL. Domain, country, also this one, because as a recruiter you have countries for 3 different objects or entities, right? You have companies, job posts, and decision makers. So I'm going to call this company country so that it's crystal clear exactly what it is. Again, company location, and I have a feeling I'm going to type company a couple of times more. Type is fine, size is fine, primary industry is fine. Description, you have job descriptions as well, so we want to choose company description. And then name, we want that to be very clear that it's the company name so that we don't mess up columns later on. And if you click on the pinned column on the left, you'll see that we have here company name, size, type, domain, country, industry, location, industries, company description, company LinkedIn, and the company ID. So we have all of the available columns in here except for company ID, which we don't need to use. And so from there, now that we have this list of companies, we can rename the workbook, we can rename the table, we can rename the table down here as well. I encourage you to have every single table have its own unique name, because when you're searching for tables to look up or to write to, it can get very confusing if you haven't given each table and workbook its own unique name. So actions here, you can find people at these companies, you can do a lot of stuff here, but what we want to do is find jobs. So the way to do that is to click on add new table, and we're just going to type find jobs, and here is the find jobs option. And so I walked you through this at the start. There are 12 million jobs on LinkedIn at the moment that Clay has in their database. And if we go to the companies tab and then choose a Clay table of companies, now when we click on this, it shows the other tables in this same workbook. So my workbook is untitled. My Clay table of companies is not named very well, so I'm going to just select it anyway. And so now, because we haven't put any other criteria into this search, except for the companies, Clay table of companies here, we now have, it should update this. If I was to click continue right now, it would probably be a bad idea, because what it might do is pull those into a new table, and that's not quite what we want to do just yet. So if we had created a filtered view of that list of companies, maybe I can show you what I mean. So here's the find companies table. Let's call it auto machinery manufacturing codes, okay? And we have the default view. But what if we wanted to create a filtered view? Like, let's say we only want to look at companies in the United States for some reason. We can go here and duplicate this view. And now we can double click here and say US companies. So we've given it a name, and we need to click on no filters, choose the filter, and we're going to go with country is equal to United States. So out of those 7,300 companies, we now have 1,200 that are in the United States. And if we just want to find jobs at the list of companies that are in the United States, we can click add, we can type find jobs, we can select that, and we can go down to our companies section, and we can choose Clay table of companies, we can choose auto machinery manufacturing companies, and now we can choose view. Now it says copy of default view because it hasn't had time to realize that I've renamed it to United States companies. If I was to refresh my browser tab and then look it up again, it would work, but I'm not going to do that. You just need to know that this is the correct one. This is basically US companies, and that has been applied. And in the company identifier column, you can choose two things for this. It's either going to be, well, it's usually going to be domain, or it could be company LinkedIn URL. So when we choose domain and give that a second, it shows that there are 2,645 jobs in those companies. If we choose company LinkedIn URL, it shows that there are 209 results. So which one is accurate? I would imagine that this one is accurate, where it's based on 209 results, where it's based on the company LinkedIn URL. The reason why is that if you choose domain, there may be some sneaky incorrect domains in there. For example, some of these companies may have their domain listed as google.com. For various reasons that can happen, but I would bet you that this list of jobs that you're seeing includes a lot of jobs at other companies, and so that is something to be aware of. So I would suggest using the company LinkedIn URL. And so we have 209 jobs. Now these are any kinds of jobs. As you can see, there are sales jobs, engineering jobs, quality control, inspector jobs. So you would just need to put in the search criteria. So job title keywords to include and also exclude is very powerful. And then job description keywords can be very, very powerful. So for example, QuickBooks. Let's see if we can find any companies that have jobs that are mentioning QuickBooks. Okay, so there are 5. Great. So anyway, it's a powerful feature that you can use to find the right people, find the right jobs, not people. So then this is where you would put the location of the job. You want to make sure that you choose the job to be in the country that you serve. So now it's gone down to 192 jobs. So we filtered out some irrelevant jobs there. Employment type, obviously, if you don't work on temp or contract roles and you only work full-time, or vice versa, you want to filter out anything that you don't work on there. Recruiter, I wouldn't recommend it for such a small number of jobs. Posting date, I would put max 90 days. And then I wouldn't limit the number of jobs because you want to pick up as many jobs as possible. Okay, so that is basically a sort of insight into what you can do with Clay in order to find jobs at specific companies of specific industries, locations, and headcount ranges. And so basically that's going to help you a lot. And then from there, we can continue for free again. We don't want to use any of those enrichments. And from there, you can just make sure that you have all of the columns. So here's another thing, job title. You could easily confuse this to be a decision maker's job title later on. So you would want to rename this and call it job post title so that it's very clear. Same with this, you want to call it job location. Company domain's fine, job LinkedIn is fine, it's very clear what it is. Company name's fine. Just want to see if we're missing any columns. So we have location already, job ID, domain, title, URL. We have that, that's the job LinkedIn URL. And then salary range, this can be useful. It's not always populated. So if we add that as a column, salary max, salary min. Now these salaries are showing 25 to 30. That's basically indicating this is probably an hourly job, whereas these indicate 75,000 to 200,000 indicates that they are an annual salary. Company name, employment type. I don't see that column in here, so we can add employment type. Also, before I do that, let's add the salary currency. These jobs are all in the US anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but okay, so we have here, and then also salary unit, so this basically makes it very clear. And we can rearrange these columns, so we can say, now it's very clear that what we're looking at is 25 to 30 US dollars per hour, or this one per year. We have the rest of the columns are already in there, so this is fine. And now that you have this list of jobs, you can then find people. So actions, find people at these companies. So making sure that you're on the jobs table, and we can rename this and say jobs at US auto machinery manufacturing codes. I abbreviate those to just be able to read most of it down here because it's a limited width. But yeah, you can basically imagine if all of these jobs were very, very targeted. Like imagine if they were all sales roles, account executive, SDR, BDR, business development, specialist, professional, whatever. Then if you have a very targeted list of jobs, then the people that you should be looking for, if we click on find people at these companies, is going to be head of sales, head of business development, VP of sales, VP of business development, chief sales officer, all of these titles, right? So then it's much more targeted and easier to find relevant people who are much more likely to be a stakeholder in the hiring of this role. And so again, we're looking at companies here. This section is automatically open, and you can see that it shows 173 companies. That is a good indicator that we're on the right table, and this is looking at the correct table. So we have jobs at US auto machinery manufacturing is the correct table to look at. We're searching by company domain. We could also search by so company LinkedIn URL is not available yet. So we could just search by domain, but I'll show you how to search by company LinkedIn URL in a minute. And then default view for this case is fine. So you would put in the job titles of the decision makers. What you could try doing is include levels like owner, partner, C-suite, VP, director, and head, even maybe manager in some cases. And then you could just put a keyword like sales, business development. Now this method is quite a basic method. In my agency, we've actually developed ways to find the exact decision maker for a role, and in many cases we can find that exact person, not just who they are in terms of their job title, but the actual person's name, their LinkedIn profile, their valid email address, and so we can reach out to them with certainty that we're talking to the right person when we message them about the role and offer to introduce candidates to them. So anyway, this is a more simple method, and if you're new to Clay, this can still work very well as long as you're very methodical and targeted about how you segment out the types of jobs you're looking for, the types of decision makers you're looking for based on their job titles. And also you can exclude things here, so if you just don't want to work with HR, then you can exclude job titles here, and talent acquisition, recruiter, human resources, all that stuff. Location is very important. If the job is in the US, you want to make sure that the decision maker is in the US in most cases, unless they're a company that's trying to enter the US market, for example. Yeah, so basically you just apply your filters. Once those are done, you can then preview the people. And we have 148 people here, and so then we can import those to a new table, not to the existing table or an existing table. We don't have a table in this workbook yet for people. We have a companies table, we have a jobs table, we don't have a people table, so we're gonna choose import to new table. Whereas if I was doing this search a second or a third time round, I could say import to existing table and choose my existing table of people. So we're going to click continue for free. So now we have our third table, which is our people table, and it shows that this is queued. Now you can set this to run on a schedule daily, and you can turn on or off update existing rows. Normally I keep it off so to just make sure that I don't use Clay credits and OpenAI tokens willy-nilly. And so let's organize it. We want to have companies, then we have jobs at those companies, and now we have decision makers. So let's rename and put DMs at companies. DMs just means decision makers. Okay, so that's basically how you can use Clay to go from a company search to a job search to a decision makers search. You can edit the source, and we have a static list of companies that meet our search criteria, but we can set up a schedule and run it daily. And I'm going to turn this off again. So now what's going to happen is every single day, Clay is going to check this list of companies and try and find jobs at this list of companies. And it's going to find new jobs. And imagine if you have more action steps in here. For example, you might have a ChatGPT column that's going to check the job description and see if any details are in there. Now the job description, unfortunately, does not get pulled through when you do a job search. So in order to get the job description, you can use Clayagent. So you can tell Clayagent to visit the job URL and return the job description. And then once you have the job description in there, you can then search for keywords in the job description to qualify it. You can make sure that the status of the job is still open. Whenever you use Clayagent, don't use Argon. Make sure that you use usually 4.0 mini, and make sure you're using your own API key so that you're not getting charged unnecessary Clay credits. You can also look at one of my videos that shows how to set up your OpenAI API key in Clay so that you can save a load of Clay credits that way. So I'm going to just close this down, but basically you can get the job description using Clayagent, tell it to visit this link, and then from there you can just search for, you can qualify the job. You can then create a default, you can create a filtered view of jobs that are qualified. So you might call it, for example, qualified jobs that meet any criteria that's important to you, and then apply the filters to those. And then when you search for decision makers, you can search for decision makers at that list of filtered views. Now there's one thing about Clay that is kind of a bug at this point. Once you've set up this search, you cannot go into it. So you can see that it shows companies, 148 companies. It's looking at the wrong table here, but that's okay if you just leave it to run on a schedule and keep all the inputs the same. It will just run correctly on a daily schedule and find more decision makers at more companies that have jobs. So that is okay. Alternatively, what you can do as a workaround is click on this little plus icon and just set up a new search. So we want to change this to look at the jobs table and then set up a second source. So if I do that real quick, it's going to show you, let's just import to current table. Now you can see it shows a purple number 2 here. That means that there are 2 sources, and if we click on here and go to source, you can see they are both there. You can rename each source so that it's clear which one is which. Okay, and I think what I wanted to show you earlier was the fact that what we did to find this list of decision makers is we searched based on, let's see, edit inputs, companies. Company domain is what it's using there. If you want to use the company LinkedIn URL instead, then all you need to do is get the company LinkedIn URL from here, from this table, into your jobs table. And that can easily be done by going add enrichment, lookup. So we're in our jobs table and we're looking up a single row in another table. So choose lookup single row in other table, and then you're going to choose the table to search is going to be your auto machinery manufacturing companies table. And this is why you need to rename your tables very, very precisely so that you can tell which table you're looking at when you do a lookup single row or lookup multiple rows. And then we're going to say target column is domain equals and then / company domain from this table. So what we're saying is look up the company in that companies table where the domain column is the same as the company domain column here in this table. So we're going to click save and run 10 rows just to see that it works. And it's pulling in the data, so you can see record found. And when we look at this, we have a JSON array, and we can see here company. If we just search for the word link, there's the company LinkedIn URL. So let's add it as a column, and it adds spaces, which I don't like, so I'm gonna fix that. So now we have the company LinkedIn URL, and there are 173, so I'm just going to run all rows that haven't run or have errors. And it's going to find the companies and then output or pass the company LinkedIn URL to here. So now for each job, we have the domain, the job LinkedIn URL, and the company LinkedIn URL. You can see here, here's a bunch more that have ran, and we have those there. So now what we can do that we have this is when we set up a search to find decision makers at specific companies, we can search now by LinkedIn. No, we can't. So let's refresh. This might be possible after refreshing. Okay, so we're going to click on the little plus icon here. Companies, we need to search in the jobs table for decision makers. And this time, company LinkedIn URL is available. So this now gives us more power to find accurately the right companies without any companies that might have the wrong domain like google.com or Linktree or even LinkedIn. And we're searching a filtered view of qualified jobs. And so now when we preview people, as long as we put in a bunch of search criteria, we can have much more accuracy over the results. And so basically that's the end of this video. This video has covered an introduction to Clay for recruiters, and I hope that you found it very useful. If you're looking for help to get a consistent flow of meetings for your recruitment agency, then get in touch with me, click the link below this video, and let's have a chat and see if we can help you. Thanks, bye.